Hello everyone, welcome to the Tim Booker channel. I wish you all an enjoyable listening experience. Today, we'll be delving into Game Over, Nintendo's conquest of the gaming industry, which primarily tells the story of Nintendo's rise and global dominance in the video game industry. Now, the global video game industry boasts a market size exceeding $100 billion, with Nintendo shining as one of its brightest stars. Both the industry and this company are worthy of our understanding. However, Nintendo's rise occurred several decades ago, and the gaming industry has evolved rapidly since then. Is it still necessary to delve into this history? Absolutely. It can be said that only by understanding how Nintendo ascended can we comprehend the business models of today's gaming industry. I've even heard a saying that without Nintendo, there might not even be a video game industry today. This statement is not an exaggeration. Over 30 years ago, Nintendo played a pivotal role in reviving the American home video game market, which had experienced a major collapse. Some media outlets speculated that it might take 20 years to recover. However, just a few years later, Nintendo led the American video game industry back to glory, almost single-handedly reshaping it and establishing the commercial blueprint for the entire video game industry. Simultaneously, they set fundamental principles that many still follow to this day. Nintendo is a Japanese company, so why did they end up saving the American gaming industry and conquering the world? Today, by the end of this book, we'll have the answers to these questions. The author of this book is David Sheff, a well-known American journalist and author who has contributed to publications like Playboy and Rolling Stone, and has interviewed prominent figures such as Steve Jobs and John Lennon. This book comprises a total of 350,000 words and contains a wealth of valuable interview material. It is often referred to as an indispensable read for anyone seeking to understand Nintendo's history. Our exploration today will be divided into 3 parts. The first part examines how Nintendo rose from a business perspective. The second part focuses on how Nintendo, almost single-handedly, reshaped the North American video game market. In the third part, we'll discuss how Nintendo learned from its experiences to avoid repeating past mistakes. The rise of Nintendo cannot be separated from one individual, and that person is Hiroshi Yamauchi. He is a descendant of Nintendo's founder, Fusajiro Yamauchi. Nintendo was founded in 1889, and for a long time, its primary business was selling playing cards, a type of Japanese paper cards often used for gambling. In 1949, at the age of 22, Hiroshi Yamauchi took over Nintendo. Interestingly, at that time, he was still called Hiroshi Yamauchi, which includes the character, for gambling. This name was given to him by his family, hoping that he would inherit the family business of making playing cards used for gambling. Why Hiroshi Yamauchi later changed his name will be revealed in the second part of our discussion. After taking over the family business, Hiroshi Yamauchi made numerous improvements, but playing cards were already a declining industry with limited market prospects. Yamauchi wanted Nintendo to explore new markets and made several attempts, including selling vegetarian rice, running a love hotel, and starting a taxi company. However, all of these ventures ended in failure. After a series of setbacks, Yamauchi realized the key to entering new markets was inherent in Nintendo's DNA. Playing cards were not essential for daily life, people bought them for entertainment. Entertainment was the foundation of Nintendo. Once he understood this, Hiroshi Yamauchi firmly set his goal, to transform Nintendo from a playing card company into an entertainment enterprise that created products that brought happiness. This became Nintendo's mission. Nintendo's president often said that it is an entertainment company that brings smiles to people all around the world. Despite selling playing cards for decades, Nintendo had the DNA of entertainment. However, in the field of entertainment, they were complete novices. Fortunately, Hiroshi Yamauchi was a visionary novice. Next, I will use the keywords visionary novice to explain how Hiroshi Yamauchi achieved this. In 1969, the visionary novice Hiroshi Yamauchi wanted to enter the entertainment industry, but he didn't know where to start. So, he established a game division and hired people to create fun things. They produced various toys, including toys like light guns and controllers that used solar-powered batteries. In 1975, Hiroshi Yamauchi began researching the American video game industry. At that time, American home video game consoles already had interchangeable game cartridges. Yamauchi had great confidence in this model for home video game consoles. He believed that as long as they continued to release interesting new game cartridges, they could keep their gaming consoles relevant. For those familiar with business models, this was essentially the famous razor and blades model, also known as the razor blade model. In other words, the inexpensive gaming console only attracted consumers as a loss leader, while the real money came from selling the game software. The razor and blades model has many famous business cases, such as Gillette razors, HP printers, and Nespresso coffee machines. The most famous example is Gillette, which maximized profits by pricing razors at 1/5 of their cost and selling the frequently replaced razor blades at more than 5 times their cost. This model sounds simple, but there's a crucial prerequisite: both the razor and the blades must be of good quality, otherwise, no matter how good the business model is, it won't work. At that time, Nintendo, still a newcomer to the gaming industry, decided to use the razor and blades model, setting themselves a challenging task: maintaining control over the quality of both the gaming hardware and software. Achieving this meant producing high-quality razors, or in this case, creating excellent gaming consoles. At that time, the core of producing game consoles involved developing and manufacturing microprocessor circuit boards. Nintendo didn't possess this capability initially and had to collaborate with electronics companies to develop gaming systems while simultaneously exploring new methods. Progress in the industry waits for no one, and as Nintendo ventured into innovation, the competition in the home video game industry grew fiercer. In 1983, both the United States and Japan saw numerous companies releasing game consoles and gaming computers. As a newcomer to the industry, Nintendo's research and development team needed to take inspiration from their competitors. They indeed studied all the gaming consoles available in the market. However, their goal wasn't to catch up with the competition. Instead, they aimed to make it impossible for competitors to catch up with them. This might sound a bit arrogant, but Nintendo's research and development team did this to fulfill Hiroshi Yamauchi's command. They had to develop a gaming console that other companies couldn't replicate within a year, and it had to outperform the competition to the extent that consumers could make their choice with their eyes closed. You might find these demands quite stringent. Even experienced gaming companies would find it challenging to meet such requirements, let alone Nintendo, which had its origins in playing cards and toys. However, Hiroshi Yamauchi's demands didn't stop here. He also ordered that Nintendo's gaming console should not only possess all the features of the gaming consoles available in the market but also introduce its own innovative features and have superior performance. Furthermore, it had to be affordable, with a target price that was 1/3 of the price of other gaming consoles in the market. If it were some other gaming company's R&D personnel facing Hiroshi Yamauchi's demands, they might have said that these requirements were impossible to achieve. However, the person entrusted with this mission was also an outsider to the gaming industry. His name was Masayuki Uemura. Before joining Nintendo, he had worked with toys and sold optical semiconductors. Being an outsider meant he didn't have to adhere to the industry's existing norms. He only needed to fulfill Hiroshi Yamauchi's demands. In his words, "We have to strive for perfection. That's the president's order." With so many requirements, what could Masayuki Uemura and his team do? In their view, the technical challenges weren't the most difficult part, the pricing was the key. The benefits of low cost were obvious: it would make Nintendo's gaming console more accessible to a wider audience. However, it could also impact performance. To save costs and achieve the target price, Uemura and his team made significant decisions. They eliminated unnecessary peripherals like a keyboard and had to settle for an 8-bit processor instead of the more advanced 16-bit processor. Through the efforts of Masayuki Uemura and his team, Nintendo's gaming console became both advanced and affordable. In terms of graphics, while other companies' gaming consoles could handle 6 to 8 colors, Nintendo's gaming console could process 56 colors. Moreover, it was priced at less than half of the competition. In 1983, this gaming console was launched in Japan and sold 500,000 units in just 2 months. This gaming console, known as the Famicom, family computer, in Japan and the NES, Nintendo Entertainment System, globally, accumulated over 60 million units in global sales. Being outsiders helped Nintendo achieve the seemingly impossible. In this context, I'd like to share a few personal thoughts. When you embark on something entirely new, don't feel intimidated or fearful just because you're an outsider. In fact, being an outsider can be your greatest advantage when you're taking on new challenges. Outsiders aren't bound by existing habits and conventions, allowing them the freedom to think creatively. As Inamori Kazuo once said, the freedom to think creatively is the privilege of outsiders, not experts. Next, let's take a look at how the visionary Yamauchi led Nintendo in creating the Razor and Razor Blade models blades, which are high-quality games. 2 years after the release of the FC console, in 1985, Super Mario Bros. Was launched. This marked the first truly significant video game for home consoles. It is hailed as the archetype of home gaming and established many foundational concepts for game development, such as character roles, game objectives, and boss battles. This game was not only successful in terms of sales. In Japan alone, it sold 6.81 million copies, with over 30 million copies sold worldwide. When discussing the success of this game, one might immediately think of its designer, Shigeru Miyamoto. He is one of the world's most successful game designers, often referred to as the teacher of all game designers, and is credited with shaping Nintendo's gaming culture. Miyamoto's most remarkable game ideas often stem from his unique perspective on the world and his childhood memories. For instance, in Super Mario Bros., Mario encounters fish that want to eat him, a creative idea inspired by Miyamoto's childhood experience of catching a fish that snapped its mouth shut. Miyamoto's creativity is highly valued, and it is said that Nintendo once prohibited him from discussing his leisure activities to prevent leaks of new ideas for Nintendo games. While Nintendo's exceptional games owe much to Miyamoto, they might not have existed without Yamauchi's visionary leadership. In this book, there are several examples that illustrate Yamauchi's foresight. One example is from the early stages of the FC console's development when Yamauchi specifically requested that the hardware team leave room for software development. He wanted software engineers to fall in love with the FC console and make game programming exceptionally easy. He believed that, in advanced hardware, other companies could easily catch up, so maintaining a competitive edge relied on software. At the time, games were stored on game cartridges, and the cost of cartridge memory was high. To reduce costs, you would need to limit memory capacity. However, Yamauchi wanted to ensure that Nintendo had a competitive advantage in games. As a result, he demanded that Nintendo's game cartridge capacity exceed that of competitors. Nintendo's game cartridges had 32 times the capacity of Atari's, which meant that Nintendo's games could be more complex than even the best games on Atari's platform. Another example relates to game development. Most companies at the time decided what games to develop, how much funding and manpower to allocate based on market research and sales feedback. In essence, the marketing department played a significant role in game development. However, at Nintendo, the marketing team could only see the finished games. In Yamauchi's view, marketing personnel only saw current trends. If development followed the standards of the day, games would lack uniqueness. The only judge of whether a Nintendo game would be released was Yamauchi himself. According to Nintendo's management, Yamauchi could foresee the development trends in the coming years and was unwavering in his decisions, refusing to heed the opinions of others. In another instance concerning pricing, the FC console was priced at less than half of its competitors. This was consumer-friendly, but wholesalers were unhappy because they couldn't make substantial profits with such low margins. Yamauchi advised them to abandon the idea of making big money from hardware and emphasized that hardware was merely a means to sell software. He guaranteed that high-quality games would make the gaming console sell well. In essence, Nintendo shifted its focus from the limited hardware market to the infinite software market from its very first game console. These examples illustrate Yamauchi's extraordinary foresight. Super Mario Bros. Undoubtedly contributed to the FC console's success, but to keep consumers engaged and prevent them from turning to other forms of entertainment, Nintendo needed a diverse and extensive library of high-quality games. Developing such games required a considerable amount of time and effort, and the fastest way to achieve this was by enlisting more reliable partners to produce blades together. Nintendo introduced third-party game developers and established a strict licensing system to ensure the quality of externally produced games. Under this system, third-party game developers had to pass Nintendo's scrutiny for game content. Nintendo produced the game cartridges and required payment in advance before taking orders. In simple terms, all the risks fell on the licensee, allowing Nintendo to reap substantial profits with its high-quality games and licensing system. With high-quality games and the licensing system for the FC console, Nintendo gradually became one of the most successful companies in Japanese history. However, Japan was just the starting point for Nintendo's quest to conquer the world. In the second part, let's start with the story of Yamauchi's name change. For the first 50 years of his life, he went by the name Yamauchi Hiroshi. The hero in his name sounded like the Japanese word for gambling. In 1977, at the age of 50, Yamauchi wanted to reinvent himself and take control of his destiny by turning his attention to his business. He changed his name to Yamauchi Satoru. Some say that the character in his new name comes from the Chinese classic of poetry, signifying, meaning, the world is like a field. Regardless of the origins of this name change, it reflects Yamauchi's ambitious nature. In his view, an industry could only accommodate one dominant company and countless smaller ones. He believed he could manipulate the industry to ensure Nintendo's dominance. To control an industry, one must influence it as a whole. At the time, the United States was one of the largest gaming markets globally. Yamauchi dispatched his son-in-law, Kawakami Ishii, to establish a company there. Their plan was to first infiltrate arcades and then introduce the FC console, a home gaming system. However, at that time, the American game console market had already collapsed. American living rooms seemed to bear a sign that read, "No game consoles or video games allowed." Kawakami Ishii, during his research in the United States, was told by someone that selling ice cream in the North Pole might be easier than selling home video games in the US. Why did Americans suddenly develop such a strong aversion to video games? Game enthusiasts are likely familiar with the video game market crash, especially the downfall of Atari and other American game companies in the early 1980s. In the early 1980s, companies like Atari enjoyed a piece of the multi-billion-dollar gaming industry pie. However, by the end of 1983, the market had shrunk to just a few $100 million. Millions of game cartridges were buried in landfills as game companies churned out and dumped low-quality games to make a quick profit. The primary reason for the industry's collapse was the rush to profit by companies like Atari. After the Atari crash, did Americans truly dislike games? Kawakami Ishii didn't believe so. Upon arriving in the United States, he initially focused on the arcade market. He found that arcades were teeming with people, and the arcade industry generated annual revenues in the billions, surpassing even the film and television industries. It was the largest slice of the entertainment industry pie at the time. Kawakami Ishii understood that perhaps the video game industry didn't collapse because people didn't like games anymore but due to poor management within the industry. With the support of Yamauchi, he set out to bring Nintendo into the closed living rooms of Americans and revolutionize the gaming market. They were able to do this for several reasons. Their products were of high quality, they had strong backing from their parent company, and their marketing strategies were unique. It's worth noting that Nintendo's approach to marketing was unlike anything seen in the United States at the time. Next, let's delve into Nintendo's marketing strategy for breaking into the American market. Kawakami Ishii understood that to sell Nintendo's gaming console to Americans, they needed to change the way Americans perceived video games. The challenge was immense because they needed to transform the negative image surrounding the entire electronic gaming industry in the United States. At that time, Nintendo's arcade games had some recognition, but the average American had no idea what this Japanese company was all about. Nintendo was essentially an unknown foreign entity. So how did they successfully alter this perception? Their approach was to differentiate Nintendo and its products completely from the past offerings in the industry. They aimed to convince Americans that they were not playing just any electronic game but Nintendo's own unique system. To achieve this distinction, they began with the product's name and appearance. In 1985, Nintendo introduced the NES console in the United States, with NES standing for Nintendo Entertainment System. Yes, it was not referred to as a game console, but rather an entertainment system. The idea was to make Americans see this system as no different from a video cassette recorder in terms of entertainment value. Regarding its appearance, the NES console featured a sleek and modern gray design, resembling consumer electronic devices rather than toys. In their advertising campaigns, Nintendo adhered to a few key principles. They avoided using the term video games in their ad slogans and emphasized that it was an entertainment system. They also refrained from calling their game software game cartridges to prevent associations with Atari. Instead, Nintendo referred to their game software as game packs. Building an impression and gaining acceptance for a brand are two different things. To ensure the American public embraced Nintendo's gaming system, they carefully planned their sales strategies. They conducted a small-scale trial in New York, known for its competitive retail environment and shrewd buyers. New York had also been heavily impacted by Atari's downfall, making it a strategic choice. If they could succeed there, they believed they could succeed anywhere in the United States. To win over the skeptical New York buyers, Nintendo made significant concessions. They provided retailers with free product placement and window displays, with no expenses for the first 90 days. If the arrangement didn't work out in the first 3 months, the products could be returned. Even with these compromises, Nintendo's team often had to make several calls to convince buyers. Nevertheless, more and more stores began to allow Nintendo's presence, creating in-store displays resembling Nintendo's game scenes, allowing passers-by to try out the games. Through these efforts, combined with advertising and in-store displays, NES sales in New York began to rise. This signified that the most challenging test had been passed. Nintendo slowly expanded into other cities, ultimately establishing a presence across the entire United States. In the first year, 1985, NES console sales in the United States exceeded 1 million units. By 1990, one-third of American households owned this gaming system. In 1992, the retail revenue of the American video game industry surpassed $5 billion. The author explains that the resurgence of the American video game industry is primarily attributed to Nintendo's efforts. While Nintendo succeeded in getting Americans to play Nintendo, not just electronic games, the failure of Atari loomed like a sword over them, requiring constant vigilance. Atari's major downfall was the proliferation of low-quality games. To avoid repeating history, Nintendo needed to address this issue. In Japan, Nintendo had established a licensing system to maintain control over game quality. However, as the number of collaborating companies increased, low-quality games became inevitable. Nintendo feared that this issue might spread to the American market. You might wonder why Nintendo didn't just work with fewer partners to ensure game quality. As a hardware platform, Nintendo couldn't afford that approach. Third-party companies were crucial because American game companies were better at creating games that resonated with local consumers' tastes. Also, in terms of profits, by 1989, more than half of Nintendo's revenue came from software. To address this challenge, Kawakami Ishii introduced stricter American licensing agreements based on the Japanese model. Under these agreements, game developers had to accept Nintendo's approval and rejection of all game-related content. Licensees were limited to releasing a maximum of 5 Nintendo games per year and were forbidden from porting games to other platforms within 2 years. Additionally, they couldn't sell games outside of North America. Nintendo argued that these measures were meant to incentivize partners to improve game quality. With only 5 chances per year, they couldn't afford mistakes. Furthermore, Nintendo implemented a security system called the lockout chip in their consoles. Only Nintendo's cartridges could run on the console, effectively locking out bootleg cartridges. Developing games for Nintendo was an arduous process due to these stringent requirements. This level of control was unprecedented in the gaming industry at the time. So why did third-party game companies accept these terms? The answer lies in the lucrative rewards. Taking Konami, a game company, as an example, when they became Nintendo's licensee in 1986, their revenue was less than $10 million in 1987. 4 years later, their revenue had soared to $300 million. Apart from concerns about game quality, the flood of game cartridges was another reason companies like Atari faced difficulties. Nintendo avoided this by implementing inventory management, a strategy similar to modern hunger marketing. This concept was introduced by Minoru Arakawa, Nintendo of America's marketing vice president at the time. He suggested treating game releases like precious treasures, cautiously releasing them in limited quantities, and creating an artificial sense of scarcity. If there were signs of a decline, Nintendo would quickly pull back. Specifically, children who saw Nintendo's game ads and visited stores to buy new games were often told that stock was running low. If they couldn't find a game in several stores, they might buy another Nintendo game to satisfy their cravings. When the new game arrived a few weeks later, these children would rush to purchase it. This inventory management method also helped avoid excess stock because retailers often overestimated market demand. The book introduces that in 1988, Nintendo's game sales reached 33 million units, while the market demand for Nintendo games was approximately 45 million units. However, the total orders from retailers exceeded 100 million units. Minoru Arakawa believed that instead of worrying about excess inventory, it was better to let retailers demand games. This aggressive approach was highly controversial. Some people argued that Nintendo deliberately created shortages to control retailers and make them more compliant. Critics also characterized Arakawa as an ambitious monopolist who used hunger marketing to squeeze out the last drop of profit. Through its strict licensing agreements and inventory management, Nintendo successfully avoided the major factors that led to Atari's downfall and enjoyed a smooth path. They only needed to release an exclusive new game to attract consumers to purchase their consoles, which in turn boosted game sales. When a sufficient number of consumers owned Nintendo consoles, other game companies would adapt their most popular games to Nintendo's system. These third-party games would attract even more people to buy Nintendo's gaming consoles. Beyond the gaming sphere, different brands sought collaboration with Nintendo to use the popular gaming IP in clothing, food, and general merchandise. These revenues supplemented Nintendo's research and development funds, driving the creation of the next big game, forming a virtuous cycle. In the 1990s, Nintendo was not only the dominant force in the gaming industry but also one of the most profitable companies globally. It ranked first in Japan and wielded significant influence in the United States. Mickey Mouse might be the most representative mascot in the US, but Nintendo's mascot, Mario, once surpassed Mickey in terms of recognition among American children. The story of Nintendo's rise to dominance in the gaming industry and its global success concludes here. The game is over. The content in this book is very rich. In addition to the history of Nintendo's development, the author also provides detailed information about many companies and their founders who once dominated the electronic gaming industry, such as Atari's founder Bushnell and the founder of American company EA, Hawkins, and many others. If you're interested in electronic gaming, I highly recommend that you find the original book to read. Today, this book is titled The Game is Over, although the author and we both know that the game console industry is far from over. In 1994, the author predicted that the electronic gaming industry, being too vast, complex, and unpredictable, would see Nintendo becoming the unshakable king of games once again but would also face unprecedented challenges. Interestingly, as of 2020, the direction of the gaming industry has not deviated significantly from the author's predictions. In the 1990s, after Nintendo led the electronic gaming industry back to glory, competitors tried to challenge this industry giant. Companies like Sega briefly went head-to-head with Nintendo, proving that this giant was no longer invincible. New competitors with their advantages emerged as well, such as Sony's PS Series gaming consoles, which dealt a series of blows to Nintendo and took the lead in the gaming console market. In the face of challenges from changing times, the industry, and competitors, how has Nintendo fared? I came across a fitting description in a Business Week report: Nintendo has always oscillated between prosperity and adversity. When their products are appealing, business is good. For example, Nintendo regained its peak with the Switch console. When their products lose their appeal, they are forgotten. In 2014, Nintendo was regarded as inconsequential in the electronic gaming industry. People likened it to giants like Nokia and BlackBerry, who had fallen into obscurity. How to avoid oscillating between peaks and lows is the goal of Nintendo's current president, Shuntaro Furukawa. Perhaps he will find a way to avoid the next downturn. Perhaps he will accept that the gaming industry is never set in stone, as Shigeru Miyamoto said, the war in the game market will never end. No one knows what will happen tomorrow. That concludes the essence of this book. Congratulations on completing another book. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker channel, like, and share this valuable knowledge with your friends. Let's combine wisdom with practice to achieve our financial goals and create a better future. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.